What if I told you the more you try to control people, the more they resist you, and the moment you stop controlling them, they start doing exactly what you want? This is not luck. This is strategy. A psychological game discovered centuries ago by Niccolò Machiavelli, a method so subtle, people never realize they're being influenced. But here's the real question: are you being controlled by others right now without even knowing it? Stay till the end, because once you see this, you can never unsee it. Freedom is one of the most powerful illusions ever created. Every human being believes they are in control of their own choices, that their decisions are independent, logical, and self-driven. But the truth is far more unsettling. Most choices are not made in freedom. They are shaped, guided, and subtly influenced long before a decision is ever made. This is where the first Machiavellian law of reverse psychology begins. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something dangerous about human nature. People don't resist outcomes, they resist control. The moment someone feels forced, their mind shifts into defense mode. Even if the action is good for them, even if it benefits them, they will instinctively push back, just to protect their sense of autonomy. Think about it. Tell a person, you must do this, and suddenly they hesitate, they question, they resist. But tell that same person, you don't have to do it, it's completely your choice. And something changes. Their guard drops, the resistance fades, and now they begin to consider it, not because the idea changed, but because the feeling of control changed. This is the illusion. People don't need actual freedom as much as they need the feeling of freedom. And once you understand this, you stop trying to control people directly, because direct control is weak. It's obvious, it creates friction, it exposes your intentions. Instead, you begin to design environments, situations, conversations where the outcome is already shaped, but the person believes they arrived there on their own. This is what makes reverse psychology so powerful. It doesn't push, it doesn't force, it simply guides invisibly. Imagine planting a seed in someone's mind. You don't tell them what to think, you don't give them a command. You simply introduce an idea and step back. Now their mind begins to work. They analyze it, they reshape it, they internalize it, and eventually they claim it as their own. This is the moment control becomes invisible. Because once a person believes this is my decision, they will defend it, protect it, and act on it with full conviction. Even if that decision was subtly influenced from the beginning. Machiavelli mastered this principle in politics and power. He knew that rulers who forced obedience created rebellion, but rulers who made people feel involved, who made them believe they had a voice, created loyalty. The same principle applies everywhere, in conversations, in relationships, in leadership, even in everyday influence. The strongest position is not when people follow your orders. It's when they follow your vision, believing it was theirs. But here's where it becomes even deeper. The illusion of freedom doesn't just influence others. It controls you as well. Every day, you are surrounded by choices that feel like your own. What you want, what you believe, what you desire. But how many of those choices were subtly shaped by your environment, by social pressure, by suggestion, by someone who understood this law better than you? That's the hidden danger, because the person who understands the illusion shapes reality, and the person who doesn't lives inside it. So the question is no longer, am I making my own decisions? The real question is, who designed the choices I believe are mine? Once you start asking that question, everything changes. You begin to see influence where you once saw coincidence. You begin to notice patterns where you once saw randomness. You begin to realize that control was never about force. It was always about perception, and the greatest power is not forcing someone to act. It's making them believe they chose it. Resistance is something most people fear. They see it as a barrier, a problem, a sign that something is going wrong. When someone disagrees, pushes back, or refuses to cooperate, the natural reaction is to push harder, to argue, to convince, to dominate. But this is where most people fail, because what they don't understand is this: resistance is not an obstacle, it's an opportunity. Niccolò Machiavelli recognized a brutal truth about human psychology. The more you try to force someone, the stronger their resistance becomes. It's instinct. The moment a person feels their freedom is being threatened, their mind shifts into defense mode. Logic shuts down, emotions take over, and now it's no longer about what's right or wrong, it becomes about winning. This is why arguments rarely work. This is why direct persuasion often fails. And this is why force creates the exact opposite of what you want. But here's where the strategy changes. Instead of fighting resistance, you use it. Think of resistance like energy. If you push against it directly, it pushes back with equal force. But if you learn to redirect it, guide it, channel it in a different direction, that same resistance starts working for you. This is the core of reverse psychology. You don't tell someone what to do. You create a situation where their own resistance leads them to your desired outcome. For example, tell someone you should definitely do this. They hesitate. They question your motive. They look for flaws, but tell them you probably wouldn't want to do this. It's not for everyone. Now something changes. Their curiosity is triggered, their ego is activated, and suddenly they feel the need to prove you wrong, not because they fully understand the decision, but because resistance has been ignited. And now they move toward the very thing you wanted. This is the paradox. The more you pull back, the more they move forward. Machiavelli understood that controlling people directly was unstable. It created tension, rebellion, and unpredictability. But when people believed they were acting against resistance, when they felt they were making a bold, independent move, they became more committed to the action. Because now it wasn't just a decision, it was a statement of identity. I chose this. I proved them wrong. This was my move. And once a person reaches that state, influence becomes effortless. But this strategy requires something most people lack: discipline, because your instinct will always be to correct, to argue, to explain. When someone resists you, your ego will want to step in and win the moment. But Machiavellian thinking demands the opposite. It requires you to step back, to stay calm, to let the resistance grow without interfering. Because the moment you try to control it directly, you break the illusion. Instead, you guide it subtly, you plant doubt, you introduce contradiction, you create just enough tension for their mind to react. And then you let their own psychology do the work. This is what separates amateurs from strategists. Amateurs try to win arguments, strategists design outcomes, but there's a deeper layer to this. Resistance is not just something you can use on others. It's something that's constantly being used on you. Every time you feel the urge to prove someone wrong, every time you act just because someone doubted you, every time you make a decision out of defiance instead of clarity, you are being guided by Resistance, not logic, not intention, but reaction, and reaction is predictable, which means controllable. That's the hidden danger, because if someone understands how to trigger your resistance, they don't need to control you directly. They just need to push you slightly, and you will move yourself the rest of the way, exactly where they want you. So the real power lies in awareness. The moment you recognize resistance, you gain control over it. Not by suppressing it, but by understanding it, because once you see how it works, you stop reacting blindly. And when you stop reacting, you become the one who guides the reaction. In the end, resistance was never your enemy. It was always a force, and like any force in the wrong hands, it controls you. But in the right hands, it becomes your greatest weapon. Ego is the most fragile strength a human possesses. It gives people confidence, identity, a sense of importance. But at the same time, it blinds them, controls them, and makes them predictable. And that is exactly why it becomes the easiest point of influence. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this deeply. If you want to influence someone, don't attack their logic, touch their ego. Because logic can be debated, but ego must be defended. Every person carries an invisible image of themselves. I am smart, I am strong, I am independent, I am right. This self-image becomes their identity. And the moment that identity is challenged even slightly, their entire behavior shifts. They stop thinking clearly. They stop analyzing objectively, and instead they react emotionally, not to find the truth, but to protect their image. This is where the strategy begins. Most people make the mistake of confronting ego directly. They argue, they criticize, they try to prove someone wrong, but this approach fails, because when you attack someone's ego head, you activate their defense system. They become stubborn, close-minded, even aggressive, and now influence is lost. But Machiavellian thinking takes a different path. Instead of attacking the ego, it provokes it, subtly, indirectly, almost invisibly. You don't say, "You're wrong." You say something like, "Maybe this isn't for you," and suddenly something shifts. Now it's not about the situation anymore. It's about them. Their pride is touched. Their identity feels challenged. And a silent urge begins to rise. I'll prove you wrong. This is the turning point, because the moment a person enters this state, they are no longer acting out of logic. They are acting out of ego, and ego is predictable. They will take action. They will commit. They will push harder than necessary. Not because they carefully decided to, but because they have to. They need to protect their image. They need to validate themselves. They need to win, and in doing so, they walk directly into the outcome you intended from the beginning. This is the hidden mechanism of reverse psychology. You don't force action, you trigger ego and let it drive the action for you. Machiavelli applied this in power, politics, and human relationships. He knew that people are easier to control when they believe they are proving something, when they feel challenged, when they feel underestimated. Because in that state they reveal everything, their weaknesses, their insecurities, their desires, all exposed through their need to defend themselves. But this strategy requires precision, because there is a fine line between triggering ego and breaking it. If you push too hard, the person shuts down or turns hostile. If you make it too obvious, they become aware of the manipulation. The key is subtlety, a slight doubt, a small challenge, a quiet suggestion, just enough to create tension, but not enough to create resistance. And then you step back, you let their mind do the work, You let their ego take control, because once ego is engaged, you don't need to guide them anymore. They guide themselves, but here's where it becomes even more powerful and dangerous. This law doesn't just apply to others. It applies to you. Every time you feel the urge to prove something, every time you react to being underestimated, every time you push harder just because someone doubted you, ask yourself, am I acting with clarity, or am I being driven by my ego? Because in that moment, you are no longer in control. You are being controlled. And the person who triggered that reaction is already one step ahead. That's the trap. Ego makes you feel powerful while quietly taking away your control. It convinces you that you are choosing your actions when in reality you are reacting to a trigger. And reaction is predictable, which means it can be used against you. So the real mastery is not just in using ego as a tool. It's in understanding it, controlling it, and not becoming a victim of it, because the one who controls their ego becomes unpredictable. And the one who is unpredictable becomes impossible to control. In the end, ego is not your strength. It is your weakest point disguised as power, and the moment someone understands how to touch it, they don't need to control you. You will do it yourself. Power in its most primitive form is obvious. It's loud, direct, forceful. It gives commands. It demands obedience. It leaves no room for interpretation. But this kind of power has a weakness. It creates resistance. The moment people feel controlled, they begin to pull away. They obey on the surface, but underneath, doubt, resentment, and defiance start to grow. And sooner or later, that resistance breaks the illusion of authority. This is why the highest level of influence is not about visible power. It's about invisible control. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that the most effective leaders, strategists, and influencers never appear controlling. They don't force actions. They don't impose decisions. Instead, they shape the environment in such a way that people naturally move toward the desired outcome without ever feeling controlled. This is what control without control truly means. You are not commanding the person. You are designing the path. And once the path is designed correctly, people will walk it on their own. Think about the difference. A weak influencer says, do this. A powerful one creates a situation where the person says, I want to do this. That single shift changes everything. Because when people believe the decision is theirs, they commit fully. They defend it. They justify it. They even convince others of it, not because they were forced, but because they feel ownership. And ownership is the strongest form of control. This is why subtle influence always outperforms direct force. It removes friction. It eliminates resistance. And most importantly, it hides intention, because the moment your intention becomes visible, the illusion breaks. People start questioning you. They analyze your motives. They become cautious. But when your influence is invisible, there is nothing to question. Everything feels natural. Everything feels self-directed. Everything feels real. Machiavelli applied this principle in the realm of power and politics. He knew that rulers who relied only on authority would eventually lose control, but those who mastered perception, who guided behavior without appearing to control it, they created stability. Because people didn't feel ruled, they felt aligned, and that alignment is what creates lasting influence. But how is this done? It starts with understanding that people don't make decisions in isolation. Their choices are shaped by environment. Emotions, timing, framing, change these elements and you change the decision. For example, instead of convincing someone directly, you shift the context. You introduce ideas gradually. You create emotional associations. You adjust the timing of information. And slowly, without pressure, their perspective begins to change, not because you forced it, but because you guided it. This is influence at its highest level. It's quiet, it's patient, it's almost invisible, and that's what makes it powerful. Because by the time the person makes the decision, they have no idea you were ever part of it. They believe it was entirely their own conclusion. And that belief is what locks the decision in place. But there is a deeper truth hidden inside this law. Control without control doesn't just apply outwardly, it applies inwardly as well. Because before you can influence others, you must learn to control yourself without force. Most people try to control their own behavior through pressure. They force discipline, they suppress emotions. They push themselves aggressively, but this often leads to burnout, inconsistency, and internal resistance. The same principle applies. The more you force yourself, the more your mind resists. But when you design your environment, when you make the right choices easier, when you align your actions with your natural tendencies, self-control becomes effortless. This is the hidden mastery. You don't fight yourself, you guide yourself, just like you guide others. Because true power is not about domination. It's about alignment, alignment of perception, alignment of desire, alignment of action, and when everything aligns, control becomes unnecessary, because everything is already moving in the direction you intended. In the end, the greatest form of power is not being seen as powerful. It's being unseen yet effective. It's influencing without force, guiding without pressure, controlling without ever appearing to control. And once you reach that level, you don't need authority, you don't need commands, you don't need to prove anything. Because people will move, decide, and act exactly as you intended, and they will believe it was their choice all along. The 13 Machiavellian laws of reverse psychology. In the end, this was never just about influencing others. It was about understanding the hidden forces that control human behavior, from the illusion of freedom to using resistance as a weapon, to exploiting the fragile nature of ego, to mastering control without ever appearing to control. Each law reveals one uncomfortable truth. People don't see reality as it is, they see it as it feels. And those who understand feelings, perception, and psychological triggers don't need force. They shape outcomes silently. Niccolò Machiavelli didn't teach manipulation for the sake of cruelty. He revealed how power truly works beneath the surface. A world where influence is rarely direct and control is almost never visible. But here's the part most people ignore. These laws are not just tools you use on others, they are being used on you. Every single day, in conversations, in relationships, in media, in decisions you believe are your own. Every time you react instead of reflect, every time your ego pushes you to prove something, every time you choose out of emotion rather than awareness, you are not in control. You are being guided. That is the danger, but also the opportunity. Because the moment you become aware of these patterns, the moment you start questioning your reactions, the moment you see beyond the illusion, everything changes. You stop being predictable. You stop being easily influenced. You stop reacting blindly, and instead you begin to observe, to understand, to choose deliberately, that is where true power begins, not in controlling others, but in no longer being controlled. So, before you leave, ask yourself one final question. How many of your decisions today were truly yours, and how many were designed by someone else? Because once you start seeing the answer, there is no going back.